event wishes to achieve today is an understanding how FGM affects individuals and families, gain a better understanding from both professional perspectives and survivors' experiences and the challenges both face. Myths versus facts to be discussed, and ways which we can work together with suggestions on alternative approaches, and lastly, encouraging a more questioning approach to the FGM agenda. We will have the first speaker to come up, who is Khadija Yazin, and she's the Women's Coordinator and lead on FGM at Israel.
Khadija Yazin. I'm the Women Coordinator at Israel Community Center. I coordinate all women activity at Israel, such as FGM. And we normally have English classes, English and math session, sewing, exercise, Zumba, spinning, and the other swimming. We take women to swimming. And we normally have advocacy team for advice for 4 days a week. Today we are here not only to celebrate Veterans Day and discuss how the government and the government bodies handles FGM victims, but to share our ideas, knowledge and experience. As a woman from affected community, we must be of this ongoing discussion to ensure that we have input into policy and procedure and add our voices to this disclosure. I have lived experience as a survivor of FGM myself, and I know how the practice affected me personally. I understand and have compassion should be at the center of how authority and the support service deal with survivors. Instead, the authority are often very harsh, further victimizing the survivor, and instead of supporting them, women from affected community are often labeled abusers. Yet, we have unsolved trauma. We need support, not accusation, suspicion, or lectures. As a woman, as a victim and survivor of FGM again, I emphasize that it's essential that the authority to engage with the affected community and not just so-called experts who have no or have special understanding at practice affected on women. We as survivors have experienced the practice firsthand, know the difficulty we have faced and understand the trauma it causes. We are calling for the authority not to traumatize us further. For example, authority gave protection order to very vulnerable women who have just had baby girls at the most delicate time of their life, when they are experiencing hormonal changes. It's this time to be giving out protection order. Are you really helping these women or further addressing them and even making them more to have postnatal depression? This action causes more worry and uncertainty at a time when it's crucial for mothers to be supported. I believe in education and mutual understanding and respect, a genuine coming together with the desire to learn, to work toward finding solutions, and putting appropriate survivor-centered support will be the first step toward appropriate affection supporting the survivor of FGM. I urge the authority and all the support agencies and organizations that supporting the survivor to help survivor of FGM and make them work with them to create informed response. All decision makers will be included, including the survivors, as they have deeper understanding of FGM and its infection. I believe just as all cultures, including the British, have had practice considered to be barbaric by others, the answer is not to punish people who practice customs we find cruel. The solution is to provide education, awareness, opportunity within and across the community, that call the United Kingdom home. Blaming survivors, suspicion, judgment, and accusation just add more trauma. I can remember when I came to this country 20 years ago, I was told to work on FGM project, and I couldn't do it. I thought, why should I talk about FGM? It's my culture. But today I'm here talking about FGM and talking about the effect it has. But we have other problem where this organization or government bodies is really pushing away the community instead of pulling at them so that we work together. Thank you very much.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm the domestic abuse leader at Ashiana. We support Burma women who are victims of domestic abuse, FGM, gang and honour-based violence, and also forced marriage as well. FGM, I did have some awareness of FGM when I first came to work with Ashiana. My upbringing was, I was brought up in a very diverse community, and I had a lot of friends who were from the East African communities. And growing up in the 80s, I'm giving away my age now, some of my friends during the summer were taken abroad to have the procedure done, and they were brought back, but no one really talked about it. And I know over the years, in particular in these last 10, 12 years, there's been a lot of focus on FGM, which I think is really important, but it's important for all of us to recognise and raise awareness. But some of my friends, the people who I worked with, the communities, have said FGM has come 20, 30 years too late. You know, we were the first generation children. Our parents were uneducated, they didn't have information, they held on to their culture very strongly, and we paid the price. We were taken abroad, we had the procedure done, but now what's happening is the second and third generation feel that they're being victimized. When women are falling pregnant, or if there's any sort of a issue with a child at school, if social services or healthcare professionals are involved, they do get asked, have you had the procedure done? And if a woman does declare and say, well, yes, I did have the procedure done many years ago, 30, 40 years ago, I had no control over this, then women feel that they're being stigmatized. Their NHS records, we call it like a red label put onto their records. And some of our women who we support said, well, this shouldn't really be the case. We should not really be judged. This was something which had happened to us many, many years ago. We had no control over it. We are more aware, we are more empowered. We wouldn't do this to our children. So I've supported a few families in South Yorkshire, in Sheffield, where they've had FGM protection orders, and it's been a very long, stressful process for these families. And also we have accommodated a couple of women in our West Yorkshire refuge where they've been, their children are potentially victims of FGM. We've had situations where migrant women have come over, usually on a dependent visa, student visa. They've had daughters here, and then the family in their native country. One woman in particular, she's from Nigeria. The mother-in-law and the extended family were putting pressure. They said it was time that she took the daughters back home to have the procedure done. And her husband was supporting this and was forceful of this, so she fled with both her children to safety, and we supported her, accommodated her, and tried our best to help her as much as we could. So there's so many different scenarios when it comes to FGM, but our service, Ashiana, we provide a specialist service, and our women are the centre of focus. We work around our women. Our women are important to us, and I really feel that that is the way forward. We need to listen to people. We need to understand them and work with communities.
The FGM stuff started to explode. And in the area where I worked, we literally were being told that there was an epidemic of FGM. And I thought, my God, we've been missing this all this time. I went back to all my colleagues, the health assistants, midwives, the school nurses, the GPs, the pediatricians. Nobody had seen any case anywhere. But the rumour had started that there was an FGM epidemic. The Independent said, FGM cases are being reported in England every 109 minutes. Barnardo said, 11 newly recorded cases in England every day. And experts regularly warned that any data was likely to be tip of the iceberg. That became a very common description, tip of the iceberg. We were led to believe that all of these girls and women had been infibulated, had the most severe form of it. And that was the image that was generally projected. Instead of, infibulation is about 10% of FGMs carried out, or at least it used to be. And inevitably, we were told that everybody would suffer health, psychological, or sexual problems as a consequence. Then a Home Affairs Committee, Select Committee was formed, and many leaders in the FGM field were called to account. There were questions as to why FGM wasn't being identified, why there weren't prosecutions. To be honest, some of those questionings were embarrassing and some didn't fare very well. And everybody started to feel the heat. Public services and the third sector are also involved in this. The 2003 law, the FGM Act, was amended in 2015, as we've heard already, by the Serious Crime Act. And that introduced the FGM protection orders and mandatory reporting. But this is when the blame game started. Tolerance went out the window and zero tolerance became all pervasive. Then the Crown Prosecution Service, they started to come under pressure. At that time, they were hopeful of a first conviction. You might remember the doctor in London who was tried for having carried out a re-infibulation. And they had huge hopes that that would be a conviction. But it wasn't, fortunately for him. But that was bad news for the CPS because they had to go back to basics. The police were accused of being too passive, of waiting for survivors to come forward and report FGM to them. They then blamed professionals, midwives in particular, for the lack of referrals to them. Professional leads from the NHS and the new FGM unit were encouraging colleagues to be braver in identifying and reporting it, because they were certain that it was out there, but people were looking the other way. They were seeing it, but they were ignoring it. Conferences and training events were held for a huge number of frontline staff, and I attended a lot of those in London. Not one person had ever seen a child with FGM carried out in the UK, but they all thought it had to be happening somewhere else. It was either in another borough in another county. Or maybe it was still happening overseas. And then, of course, because there was so much focus on it, social workers started to get loads of referrals, child referrals, that they didn't know what to do with, because the children had had FGM historically.
FGM is found among both Muslims and Christian communities, for cutting is done with instruments ranging from scalpels and razors, blades to scissors. The most severe type of FGM involves a total removal of the genitalia. Older women without medical training is in the surgical procedure carried out FGM in rural areas, but in urban areas it's performed by trained doctors. The official practice of FGM by trained doctors was condemned as it encouraged the practice and also made people who practice FGM feel that it's acceptable. The health consequences can be severe pain, shock, getting cysts, infections, menstruation, problems. FGM increases the risks of labour complications and newborn deaths. The procedure itself can be fatal, as well as psychological effects can last a lifetime. I've had many conversations with ladies here and they've shared their stories with me. I'm going to tell you 2 stories that ladies have shared with me. The first one, it says, I can remember I was 8 years old when my paternal aunt came to visit us. To me, it was normal for us to get visits from family members. She gave us presents, and to my surprise, I got more presents than my 2 other brothers, but I didn't understand why. After our meal, she took me to another room and started talking to me about circumcision. I got excited because all my friends would be circumcised together and stayed together for 2 weeks. I was the youngest among my group. I can also remember that we all met in our neighbour's house, which was the biggest in the neighbourhood. We were laughing and talking, and we didn't realise what was ahead of us. We were called in one by one. All of a sudden, we heard screaming, but I didn't understand what was going on until it was my turn. I was told to lay on the table in one of the rooms, and my legs were pulled apart. Still, I didn't know what would happen. Then I saw the injection. I started to scream. When I got the injection, I was injected by a male doctor, as it was not legal by that time to do the FGM. After the injection was taken again to another room where we waited, but the happiness vanished because all the girls realised that it was not exciting anymore. Again, we were called on one by one, then the screaming started again, but now more screaming. When it was my turn, I was told again to lie on the same table. The doctor did something, but I didn't feel the pain much. After a few hours, I started feeling pain all over my body, especially in my genital area. I couldn't pee for a few days until my stomach became very big because of holding the urine. After 2 weeks, I became better. Then my problem started when I started my period. I had so much period pain that I couldn't go to school. Clots didn't come out. I sometimes had to pull them out because the passage was very narrow because of the stitches. All this happened, but I never connected it to FGM or the cut until I started having children and heard of the campaign to eradicate the practice. I will never do this to my girls. The family's gone back to Somalia in 2017. The father had saved for 2-3 years to go on holiday. He worked many hours, took on extra jobs and what have you. The father then went to the GP to get injections done for the family to go abroad. That was just routine. 24 hours before departure, there was a knock on the door. It was the police. The police came. When the police came into the house, the family and the girl were like, what's going on, what's happened? And they said, we're going to take you, we're going to question you, why are you going to Somalia? What's the purpose of your visit? And then the family said, we're just going on a family holiday. The 2 girls at the time were 13 and 14. They were then taken into police custody and they were questioned. Then they were told that they couldn't go. Then they had to go to court, a travel plan was placed for the family. This was then the girls at the time, they were shocked. The family had saved so much money. They were like, what's going on? They still couldn't comprehend. They said, only going there as a heart. They kept telling them, we're going on a family holiday. It's a holiday, I won't do this to my daughters. As time went on, one of the daughters said to me, I went to school, I was late for school. I just remember the teachers were all on the walkie-talkies. Where is she? Where have you been? What were you doing? She was like, I was just late for school. I didn't understand what was happening at that time. So then the family went back to court to get to lift the travel plan, which was then allowed. They then went to Somalia. They had to save up again to go again because they lost all that money. She said to me, the drama started when she came back. When she went through them security gates, that's when it all kicked off. That's when security came in. Security would then take the 2 girls and put them into a room and said to them, what happened in Somalia? What was done to you? They said nothing, we just went on holiday. She said they kept on asking us the same questions but in different formats. They said nothing was done. They let them go. They came home. Then they got a phone call. The girls then had to go to the children's hospital. And then she said to me, I'll never forget this. She goes, I had to prove my innocence. I had to prove that my family didn't do this to me. When they were in the children's hospital, they asked the girls to learn with them. They had to check the private area. She goes to me, I was 15 at that time. I'll never forget. I had to lay on the table. I didn't want to do it, but I had to prove my family's innocence. They had to take pictures of my genitalia. They had to take pictures and video record me. There was 3-4 women in the room. And I told them that my parents wouldn't do this to me. We just went on holiday. And she goes, this lives with me forever. And I'm still scarred by the effect that this has happened to me.
Thank you, Yasmin, for your kind comments. So, I'm Zainab Noor. I'm from Hidden Voices UK. It's a national campaign organisation. It's a campaign. It's not a charity. And most of us that came together to set it up was to actually show the other side of the narrative. A lot of our communities were actually fed up with the mainstream narrative that was coming on the media regarding our communities. You know, there was very misleading on data. Families have been stopped at airports and racially profiled, and because they're going to Africa to visit their family, they stopped and then thinking that they're going to take their kids to have FGM. Lots of racial profiling. And some of these mothers as well, they something that happened to them 30, 40 years ago, and they're accessing healthcare services, and they get asked a question, have you had FGM? Yes, I did. And then they've got young children under 16, then a referral, they make a referral to safeguarding. So I'll just tell you a little bit of my background. I grew up in Wales, second generation. I used to come to Sheffield a lot back in the 80s, and this is where I met Sophia and many other people. My parents were migrants, so there was not many Somali community. We just lived in, we were kind of close because we were a small community, seamen families, you know, in different ports of the UK. So at that time, yes, we would say it was an epidemic. We would say 70 to 80% of girls were being taken back home. But we're talking about something that happened 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So I actually joined the anti-FGM campaign with a lady, I'm not sure you know, FEB, she's passed away now, but she set up the campaign, which was called Forward Foundation for Women's Health Research. So we were part of the initial campaign to actually get it known to the local authorities, to local government. So at that time it's about protecting children, safeguarding children, and making sure that our rights of children maintained, and also getting better healthcare service for ladies who were fibrillated. But I think what happened is, you know, obviously you get married, you have kids. I left the campaign, and then I came back a few years back. I would say about 10 years ago, and then I'm seeing families being placed on FGM protection orders. Ladies coming up to me all the time and saying they've been referred to social services, and I said to them, well, you know, show me your paperwork. So if they have an FGM protection order, they show me their FGM protection order, and I read the statement that's written on there, which is something that happened to her 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and then she's been accused that she's going to do it to her kids, you know? And what we went and looked at is the safeguarding policies, which were very discriminatory, and they had like the risk factors in there, which was very misleading. So what, obviously the film you're going to see now is the BBC Wales one. So I got the ladies together and I said, you need to tell your story. If you don't talk, then our next generation of girls in our community are going to be actually, you know, penalised or racially profiled. So we have to tell the other side of the story, and that's how we got the BBC Wales programme done. And at that time, they didn't really want to go on the media. They were like, okay, we'll talk, we can put a shadow. But on the day of filming, they said, no, we're going to tell our stories full face. And I was really proud of our ladies. The other programme that we did in 2020 was the Victoria Derbyshire show. The Victoria Derbyshire show was We shared some of the FGM protect. The parents gave their shared their consent to share it in regards to the orders. We showed it to the BBC, and then when they saw that and they saw all the stuff, that's every case that we were looking at FGM orders is family are being picked on because they were from an ethnic community or they had FGM in the past, and next minute put on order, and people don't understand that there's severe complications in actually contesting the order, getting a solicitor. I've probably come to Sheffield about 5-6 times supporting families on FGM orders, and the solicitor would come from London. You know, Yasmin would send a referral to us, we would travel over here, and then we're trying to, and most of the FGM protection orders was done by the police in Sheffield. So it was just really supporting these families to understand their legal aspects. Our campaign and the conference, today's event, is to actually show you the impact of FGM laws on marginalised communities, the other side of the narrative, which, you know, so many people have not heard about. Right now we have a Somali couple in Ireland. They were convicted a couple of years ago, and they won their case on appeal last year. So they were accused of doing FGM on their daughter, you know, and they were in prison for 2 years. They just got out a year ago, and they're going to have the retrial in June of this year. And that's with our supporters getting somebody else in another country to actually look at the medical evidence, you know. And then we also have the Ugandan case of a lady that's, I think she was sentenced to 13 years. You know, some of us watched the trial. She never had female circumcision. And she, again, was convicted, you know, and she has nobody to support her. So we're hoping, you know, there needs to be a lot of media about that and campaign, but we're still working with her to see, you know, what support we can get her to have a retrial. So what we want to do is like educate, I want to educate my, you know, social work colleagues and people in the profession to look at the other side of the narrative. Don't, when you get a referral through child protection, or you're doing a Section 47 investigation, because you get that referral, look at it, ask the family, look more details, rather than the person that's made the referral, like what they've written on it. A lot of the things are very misleading, and then when you go and do the investigation and you speak to the mother, you completely hear a different side of the story, and I just want people to be mindful what is actually written about these families. So I hope you enjoy watching the film. If you need to ask any questions later, hopefully you can, you know, we can answer it for you. Thank you.